When we first meet the main character of the film, The Sword of Doom, he appears in response to a prayer, only he's the bringer of death. Like an angel of death looming against the white clouds, the main character randomly and brutally kills an old man. And from the very beginning, this marks the main protagonist as a character that stands apart from society, morality, law, and even the esteem of others. And from this moment on, we follow in the footsteps of a man that many would consider evil. But why do we continue to watch? Why is evil so fascinating? The Sword of Doom released in 1966 and was directed by Kihachi Okamoto. Like with Kurosawa, Okamoto was a contract director at Toho. So we do get to see some familiar faces and names in this film, which include the composer Masaru Sato, the screenwriter Shinobu Hashimoto, and of course the actor Toshiro Mifune. From the very beginning, you could see that Okamoto was a fan of Kurosawa's Yojimbo because he introduces the main character in a very similar way. Ryunosuke is seen in the foreground with his back to the camera, sort of as a monumental presence like those distant mountains. Okamoto's camera work and cutting in the opening sequence from shot to shot is very angular. And he makes use of perspective changes that you didn't really see yet in Hollywood films of this period. In this scene, for example, he uses a 180-degree shot change. It makes the scene itself seem very lively because they aren't intuitively what the viewer is expecting. And this was of course unlike anything Hollywood was doing at the time. Okamoto was known for his geometric sense of space. It was something he shared in common with other great directors of the genre like Kurosawa and Kobayashi. Besides the film having an excellent director, it also has more than one legendary actor. There's of course Toshiro Mifune, who plays a skilled master of a school. He's the only character in the film that Ryunosuke shows any fear towards, and he represents a good and just swordsman. He avoids conflict and he honors skilled opponents. But when there's no other option, he will slaughter whatever is in his way. And that's what makes him a badass. But his anger is at the fact that these great swordsmen are wasted and just had to perish in a pointless way. And of course, there's the legendary actor Tetsuya Nakadai, and he plays the psychopathic swordsman named Ryunosuke, and this honestly might be his best role in the film. He's able to transform himself into just this cold-blooded killer that could just send chills down your spine with just one glance. And like some of his other films, most of Nakadai's acting is in his eyes. You could just look in those big eyes of his and just feel the emptiness and murderous intent. He's always had that skill of acting with his eyes, and he was once asked about it, and he just said that he would make himself take in and feel what his character would be feeling, and the expression would take over itself. So the story itself follows Ryunosuke, who's a powerful swordsman who has developed an evil style called the Silent Stance. This stance makes him appear to be vulnerable in order to draw out his opponent before cruelly cutting them down. This sword style combined with his skill allows him to leave a trail of bloody corpses wherever he goes. Ryunosuke himself is a complex character with an evil streak and a desire to kill. The story itself is based on an old novel. It was originally going to be a trilogy of films, but apparently it was cancelled due to the over-the-top bloodbath of a scene the film ends with. It was just too much for people to handle at the time. And it's really a shame because this could have been an awesome trilogy. Mifune got his samurai trilogy, and this should have been Nakadai's. When you watch it, you'll notice that there's some plot lines that don't really go anywhere, and you could definitely tell it was part of something much bigger. There is good news though. If you're interested in this story, there's also a trilogy of films called the Satan Sword Trilogy. You could get it at SamuraiDVD.com. I'll provide a link in the description where you can get it. That version is supposed to stick much closer to the original novel, as written by Nakazato Kaizen. What's probably the most interesting thing about this character is that his sword style is a metaphor for his character. Even the way Nakadai holds the sword is deceiving. He's inviting you in for a slaughter. Mifune's line of dialogue in this couldn't be truer. The sword is the soul. Study the soul to know the sword. Evil mind, evil sword. The extreme but very stylized violence of Okamoto's 1966 film epitomizes a mode of Japanese filmmaking that profoundly influenced directors like Sam Peckinpah and Sergio Leone, and much later even Quentin Tarantino. It would be easy but not inaccurate to read the film in the light of the cynical anti-hero trends that they were seeing in the 1960s with films around the world. In a way, it represented the break with heroic tradition that we saw in spaghetti westerns. This kind of anti-hero trend that was going on in the 60s actually came back because I remember in the early 2000s, everything had anti-heroes. At least with anti-heroes, they can sometimes seem more relatable because they'll make like selfish decisions, which honestly people do in real life. The novel that the film was based on was originated as a newspaper serial in 1913. It continued to appear for 3 more decades, having 41 volumes published before it was left uncompleted at the death of its author, Kaizen Nakazato. His novel was intended as an expression of Buddhism with the earthly actions of its characters, and most especially the demonic swordsman Ryunosuke, representing the working out of karmic law. On the surface, one might say if indeed an evil soul is an evil sword, then form and style is a depiction of profound undercurrents. The unrelenting visual intensity of the Sword of Doom, ending in the final massacre with its thousands of variations on the theme of killing with a sword, is not a matter of flashy illustration, but instead it's the essence of what the film is about. Sword style here takes on life of its own. The human killing machine, blinded and stumbling in his own blood, has become something of a force of nature. It's a destructive presence. The unmistakable visual beauty of the scene is inseparable from its horror. The kind of perverse nature of the central character ends up taking over the film, and it gets the message across. And maybe we didn't need the sequels that Okamoto never made. Honestly, when you think about it, what really could have surpassed the freeze frame that we get of Nakadai called Mid-Rampage, where he's just hell-bent on continuing to kill as if he was battling his own inner demons and guilt. All the guilt from the sins that he's committed throughout the film just coming to haunt him. If anything, it lets us, the viewer, come up with the ending. Will we see Ryunosuke be consumed by his own evil, or will he finally be at peace? It's a great concept, it's a great movie, and just a legendary actor's greatest achievement. And it will always be a classic movie and just a gift to anyone that loves good cinema. So, concluding my original comments on the fascination with evil, the character Ryunosuke is just one of those characters that seems to have escaped from their writer's control, taking on a life of his own. He is an icon of pop culture as the embodiment of the fascination of evil, which ends up giving him his charisma. Ryunosuke is a fallen angel of early modern Japan, a figure who elicits sympathetic identification by the uncompromising intensity with which he follows his path, even if that path seems to lead into darkness. Anyway, thanks for watching.